Thank you, David. Thank you, Bay Presbyterian, and thank you, Community West Foundation. Without your support, we couldn't do the work that we do collaboratively. It's a real pleasure to come here and speak at Bay Presbyterian. My son, I'm Catholic, but my son comes to the youth group here actually every Sunday and raves about it, so it's the second time I've been inside. Today, the three of us are going to give you an overview of the refugee process, talk a little bit about the facts and dispel some of the myths that are out there. And I think this is very timely because as we watch the news every day, there's a discussion somewhere about refugees in the world. We hope that we can highlight some of the work that we've done specifically with the foundation money that was given to the Refugee Services Collaborative, and then talk a little bit about the overall collaborative in general. So we're going to talk a little bit about the refugee process, a little bit about the local work and how it impacts this area, and then talk a little bit about the collaborative. So, who's a refugee? A refugee is anybody who is forced out of their homeland due to a well-founded fear of persecution based on their race, their religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership to a social group. So it's somebody that is forced out of their homeland due to war, violence, and conflict. In the world, there's about 65 million people that have been displaced. Some people are displaced in the same country because of war. In Syria, people are moving from one part of Syria to another. There are people that are displaced and leave the country, which are refugees, and there are people that are gone to other countries to seek political asylum. Out of the 65 million people in the world, 21 million, and that number is growing, are actual refugees and a high level of concern with the UN. Right now, 1 in every 300 people in the world is a refugee. So, refugees flee their homeland. They're in that second country. If you're fleeing Somalia, if you're fleeing Syria and you're in Lebanon or you're in Kenya, it takes about 15 years to kind of go through the process and wait. But there's 3 durable solutions with refugees. The first durable solution that tries to be met is that refugees can safely return home to where they came from. And if you talk to a refugee or anybody that's pushed out, a lot of times that's what they would prefer to do. They'd like to go home. They'd like to go home to their farm, to their job, to their family, and pick up where they left off. The second durable solution is local integration. So a refugee is forced out of their homeland. They're in that second country. Typically that's a bordering country. And the hope is that maybe that second country will accept them and allow them to stay there indefinitely. They have the same rights and protection that any native person of that country can have. Unfortunately, the first 2 things don't always happen. Sometimes they can never return home, or there's nothing to return to because they've been out of their homes for so long, or they're not welcome in that second country. So the third durable solution is a third country resettlement. And that's what the United States is. We're a third country. And neither one is is more important or better than the other. It's just an option. I'm going to go here. Typically, 1% of the refugees out of that 21 million people, 1% will get a chance to go to a third country, to get resettled indefinitely in a third country. The U.S. is one of 28 countries that will allow refugees to come into their borders and to be permanently resettled after they've been thoroughly vetted and referred to the U.S. resettlement program or those other 27 countries. The U.S. will resettle the most refugees than the other 27. The process, like I said, typically refugees wait in limbo for about 15 years. Once they're referred to the U.S. program, they go through a real stringent process of background checks, a vetting process. This is something that's been a topic in the news lately, especially over the last year. I think people are saying refugees aren't vetted thoroughly. They don't have background checks. That's just not the case. Once a group of refugees is referred to the system, it takes about 18 to 24 months to go through this process of background checks, interviews, fingerprints. The FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, Interpol are all called in to make sure that anybody that they're allowing into the U.S. program is thoroughly checked out to make sure that they are safe and they're not here to harm us. There's no other immigrant that goes through such a process as the refugees do. And two, if you don't really know what country you're going to get referred to if you're going to infiltrate sometimes. So you don't know if you're going to come to US or Brazil or Ireland or one of those 27 countries. Once they go through that process, every refugee that is permitted to come here has to sit down and have a final interview with a Department of Homeland Security officer who can either approve or not approve that particular case. And they don't have to have any reason at all not to approve that case. They could just say you're not suitable to come to the US, and then that kind of then takes them out of the pool. So they're very thoroughly vetted. I'm gonna go back. The other process is once they come, the State Department then works with about 300 municipalities across the country to help resettle the refugees once they're here. Catholic Charities is one of them. In Cleveland, there's Catholic Charities, the International Services, and us together. All three of us are tasked with the responsibility to help refugees get a start. And that's where we work with our community partners that you guys support, like Building Hope in the City, or the Refugee Response, or Asian Services, who are there to extend our services. We help them find their initial housing. We help them get jobs at places like Odie, where we have quite a few people working. We get them able to work on the job and understand the culture. That's the responsibility of the resettlement agency and our community partners. Refugees, once they're here, they're documented. They're called an eligible non-citizen. So they are on their pathway to citizenship. They can apply for citizenship in 5 years. Is a general rule. Sometimes that can be quicker, and it's up to them. But most refugees do become US citizens. But when they get here, they're documented. They have the ability to work. They have the ability to live here indefinitely, and then hopefully and encouraged to become US citizens. So the US, this year, the United States is taking the most refugees it has since before 2011. 85,000 refugees will be in the US by the end of the year, which ends in about 3 weeks, September 30th. It's been a very busy year. These numbers that are up there are changed a little bit. Right now, Ohio gets about 6% of the refugees coming to the US throughout 9 different resettlement offices throughout the state. Like I said, there's 3 in Cleveland, and then the other ones are in Columbus, and Cincinnati, and Dayton. About 2,000, closer to 3,000 now, refugees will come to Ohio this year. This is the most refugees that Ohio has actually resettled altogether. And typically, we resettle refugees, when we say Northeast Ohio, we resettle them pretty much across the city and into the suburbs. Catholic Charities resettles refugees in Lakewood, the west side of Cleveland, Parma on the west side. International Services will help resettle refugees downtown, Parma on the west side, as does us together. Typically close to the office, because a lot of things that have to happen initially when they're here comes from the office. A lot of our classes and support and training comes from those organizations, so they travel to one of those different resettlement agencies. And the numbers of refugees that have been coming is really increased. And that's one of the goals of the collaborative that Brian is going to speak about. This year, though, collectively, between the 3 resettlement agencies, we've resettled probably the most in Cleveland, probably in the last 2 months, that we ever have. It'll be over 1,000 people this year, which is very impressive. Thank you.